name's Julia, and welcome to my YouTube channel, The Little Blue Bookworm. Today, I finished Rebecca, finally. Overall, I really enjoyed it, and I think I give it 4 stars. So this is going to be the review for Rebecca. If you haven't read it and you want to, I recommend that you do that right now, because I will probably be talking about spoilers. I'm going to try and keep it spoiler-free, but I make no promises. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. It just wasn't at all what I thought it was going to be. I was expecting something more thrillery, something that had a really spooky kind of atmosphere. I was expecting it to be romantic and suspenseful, and for most of the first, 2/3 of the book, it is neither. It's weird because it wasn't what I was expecting it to be, but I never felt disappointed either. The way this story was told, it was so masterfully done in some ways. She lived in her house with her husband, and her own sense of foreboding grew over the course of time, but it wasn't really because of all these sinister little things that added up. It was more of she just felt more and more dissatisfied because she thought her husband didn't love her. And I also thought for most of the book that he didn't love her. I still feel like he does not love her. I tabbed this book, I don't know if you could see, I did it after I finished reading it because I wanted to talk about this specific part. The protagonist's name is not mentioned at all. Her husband's name is Maxim, and throughout the book, there wasn't ever really a spot where I felt like he loved her. There's a part towards the end where he finally tells her, "I love you," and at that point, as a reader, I was like, I'm not buying it. I know they were really in love and whatever then, but as a reader, I didn't really see their relationship flourishing. I only saw when they came back to Manderley. It felt very much like he only got her as kind of like a distraction from whatever the heck was eating at him at the beginning of the book. There's this passage as well. I want to read it to you. I feel like she described it perfectly. She says, "I wished he would not always treat me as a child, rather spoilt, rather irresponsible, someone to be petted from time to time when the mood came upon him, but more often forgotten, more often patted on the shoulder and told to run away and play." And I feel like that described their relationship perfectly. They don't spend that much time together, and when they do, most of the time it's just her feeling the age gap. Normally, again, age gap's not really a big deal to me, but the fact that every single time they interacted towards the beginning, she ended up kind of feeling worse about her situation, and I know a lot of it was from the housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers. I like both of them. I think they're interesting characters. I like her a little bit more. I loved the protagonist. I thought she was incredibly relatable, which generally I shrink away from protagonists who I feel like can be dubbed as relatable. And I feel like the setting helped differentiate it from all those other protagonists in YA that I've read about. There's this one part, she sees people coming on the estate and she feels very awkward and she does not want to talk to them. So she sees them coming and she thinks about leaving out the window to avoid meeting them. But then she sees they're coming from the garden, so she just flees to the rest of the house. And I found that very relatable. She still has trouble grasping for conversation topics, which I felt, again, very relatable. And I really enjoyed seeing that she was kind of inept in those things, because it also helped separate her from Rebecca, which was Maxim's deceased wife. The root of her insecurities was Rebecca, who was always super confident. And she always has to live up to the ideal of Rebecca. Another thing I really liked was the protagonist's sister-in-law. I would have liked to see the protagonist more with some of the other relationships. There's a scene towards the middle where she interacts with Maxim's grandmother. And I also had another relative who was much older a couple years ago who had Alzheimer's. And just the description of the grandma, who I think had Alzheimer's, and I enjoyed reading about that because, again, it just felt like the author knew what she was talking about. Normally, naivety and stupidity get on my nerves without fail. But in this book, I feel like I enjoyed it because she wasn't stupid. She picked up on things and she didn't ignore them. She tried to push them to the back of her mind and not think about them. Normally, when the protagonist is stupid, it's like all these red flags are going off and they're just like, oh, nothing must be wrong. And that always irks me. I get that the author is thinking, oh, in this actual situation, you probably wouldn't think of that all these things that are happening are huge red flags. But it's not real life. It's a book. And as a reader, I know they're red flags signaling something really bad. And the protagonist is just being stupid, which did not happen here. And I really enjoyed that. I loved the way Manderley was described. Like the walks, when they walk out, they're these field of rhododendrons, and all these azaleas as well. And it's so beautiful. It's right by the beach, but I enjoy that the way the beach is described, it's described as being very pale, like ice green kind of color. It's very cold. It's kind of gloomy. I did like the way they showed that everything, like, even though Rebecca is dead, all the things that are around the house, everything is a reminder of her. I would have loved if she literally felt like she could never escape Rebecca. This sounds awful, but I feel like it would have made it feel more intense and kind of helped that whole uneasy feeling if we had seen, like, over time with, like, all the small Rebecca things build up more and more and more until, like, the protagonist's own mind is starting to crumble a little bit and she starts to get kind of paranoid and, like, she can't get away, where maybe she starts to there would be a scene where she hyperventilated or something. Like, she just feels so suppressed by, like, the spirit of Rebecca that she just can't get away. Another thing I forgot to add that kind of proves to me that her relationship with Maxim wasn't that great is that there's a scene where he leaves to London a couple days and she feels relieved as soon as he's gone, and she goes out with Jasper and she has a good time just being at peace. And I feel like that's another thing where, like, you sure they're meant to be together? You sure? Again, I'm not super upset that they ended up together. He is perfectly nice. There's nothing super wrong with him or her, and I like that she matures so that she's more of a companion for him. And I feel like that's what saved it. The fact that she really wouldn't know how to do these things, and at the beginning she doesn't really want to learn, which I'm not picking fault with her because nobody expected her to, and nobody really wanted her to learn how to do all these things as the Mrs. De Winter. But I feel like the author should have shown her wanting to do more of this, and her husband encouraging her, and I feel like I would have shipped them more. Here it just felt like he was thinking, I don't really care what you do, whatever you do, sure, fine, which on one hand is fine, but on the other hand it felt like he didn't care, period. Also, throughout the story, it shows her where she's just trying to make him happy, and there's this one part at the beginning where they get into an argument over something stupid, and he just, like, kind of badgers her about it a little bit, and she's like, I'm sorry, and I haven't read about a whole bunch of unhealthy romantic relationships, but when I do, that's one thing I really find, like, also that's realistic, when two people get into a huge argument and only one is ever always sorry and the other one always just expects, like, an apology. Like, that was the only huge argument they had in the book, so it's not a huge deal in the big scheme of things. But at the same time, he does have a bit of a temper, and I feel like the way her personality is, it could get unhealthy. Also, for me personally, I kind of felt like she worked better with this other guy. She felt more comfortable with him. Again, I didn't super ship them. I wasn't really invested in either of the ships, which I feel like is another reason I was able to enjoy it so much. I did like Maxim. He was okay. And the other guy, they did show him that he was a little boring and couldn't really take a joke, whereas Maxim is always joking a lot, which I appreciated that they showed that difference, and that's why she kind of gravitated towards Maxim. But at the same time, she could relate to the other guy. His name is Frank. She could relate to Frank's dullness because she felt like she was boring and always dully safe. And all her conversation with him was that way, which was why it was kind of comforting. I just feel like the author should have done a bit more to show that they are meant to be together, period. Because I thought her husband was going to be dangerous to her, and that's why it's romantic suspense, because at first he's the mysterious gentleman whose past wife died, and he's super rich and handsome and all that, and I thought that was kind of how he ensnared her. And then when she gets to his house, she discovers small things that would add up until she discovers this big secret where he is actually kind of dangerous to her. I did enjoy the book, but I didn't love it until I got to like the very end. In the last 100 pages, there were quite a few, I wouldn't say plot twists, but reveals that really caught me off guard, which I enjoyed, but it wasn't still enough to make me love it. What really made me love it, ironically, is there were 3 chapters at the end. That one is the author's note saying how she got this idea and her experiences and where these ideas came from. And the second was her inspiration for Manderley, which was the estate that Maxim had. And the last one was the previous epilogue, and I really enjoyed all 3. The previous epilogue is one of the first drafts that came when she was first writing the book, and in that I think it's funny that also in the author's note she mentions that Maxim was originally named Henry, but she thought it was too boring, so she changed it, which I feel like Maxim does suit him more, and I'm glad she changed it. The epilogue is essentially the first draft of the epilogue, which would eventually become very similar to the very beginning of the book, and I feel like it is better the way it is now, but I'm so glad the epilogue was there, because the way the actual book ends, it ends very abruptly, and I liked the abrupt ending, kind of. Half of me felt, the last 100 pages in general, felt like half of it, the reveals that were coming on were super interesting, but at the same time, it just felt like she was trying to draw out the story. And a part of me, again, I liked it, and I was there for it, but at the same time, I wanted to be done. There are 410 pages, but still enjoyed that, even though I wanted it to be done. At the same time, when the reveals happened, it just kind of made everything fall flat. The reveals were some guy is trying to get him convicted for his wife's murder. At the beginning, it sounds like they're on the run from the law or something. So when I read it and nothing happened, we still have a good 100 pages, something's probably going to happen. I wasn't super invested in them because I knew how it ended, which again, I like the prologue, but at the same time, it lessened the tension. I know where this all ends. They're still alive. And throughout the entire book, I never felt uneasy or worried for the protagonist's well-being. I thought I was going to be really scared for her because, again, I thought it was going to be more like a thriller. And I'm fine that it wasn't. I feel like if you want to read this, go into expectations of Northanger Abbey or Jane Eyre, because it gave me serious Jane Eyre vibes. Even then, I feel like Jane Eyre was scarier in a way. And Jane Eyre is not scary. It's spooky at some points, but again, it's more like that kind of vibe. Another show I'm watching right now is Over the Garden Wall. It's a kids' show that's designed to be kind of spooky and unsettling. It was more unsettling than Rebecca. So if you were looking for something spooky, maybe something to unsettle you or make you feel uneasy, this is not the book for that. There is this one moment towards the middle-ish end where the housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers, is kicking it up a notch. She opens the window and says, "If it should have been you, not her, who was dead." And she opens the window and she says, "If you really feel bad, then jump," kind of deal. And the way I'm telling it, it sounds way more intense than it actually was. In the book, I knew nothing was going to happen. It's kind of obvious that nothing's going to happen, and I would have loved if she kicked it up a notch there and really made it even more intense and more dangerous. Also, for the main character's character arc, I understand that it was supposed to be her growing up and getting over her insecurities, but I feel like it was not gradual at all. Maxim told her he loved her, he explained everything, and suddenly, boom, she was fine. She was all grown up just because he loved her. I am very shy. Shyness does not work that way. Even if I loved someone romantically, I wouldn't suddenly get over my shyness and my insecurities. They're still there. You have to work at them for them to go away. And even then, it will take years. It doesn't happen overnight or within seconds. Again, reading it through, it didn't feel that unrealistic. It just felt like, oh, okay. I didn't mind it terribly. I feel like I'm being really critical of this book, but overall, I did really enjoy it, and I loved it, and I binge read it a lot until the last final 100 pages. Then I felt like I was kind of done. But even then, there were so many reveals that came that tied in with stuff that was kind of foreshadowed at the beginning that I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, and I like how it tied back. I love foreshadowing. I feel like I feel like it almost tells slightly two different stories. Like, if you want to go down this route where they are really meant for each other, I think that the author needed to change a couple things. If she wanted to go down the route I thought it was going, then yeah, most of the beginning and the seeds that were sown should have stayed the same. But like at the beginning, I thought when I read it that the reason she was staying with him is because they got married. She doesn't hate him, but they don't love each other. They're just friends. And I would have enjoyed that as well. I thought that would be an interesting dynamic where she feels kind of stuck in this relationship that isn't necessarily unhealthy. It's just they're friends, and I would have thought that would be also an interesting way to show her grow up, where all the hormones have died down after the whole flurry of like the honeymoon and being a wife, a newlywed, and then suddenly she realizes that this isn't what she really thought it was going to be. And I feel like that would have been a much better character arc for her. All this said, I still rate it really high at 4 stars. Maybe 4.5, maybe. I really enjoyed it. The language is gorgeous. I loved the ending. I loved the last 3 chapters that weren't actually a part of the book. I loved seeing the author talk about her experience writing this book and made it kind of come even more alive to me. I loved reading the epilogue and I feel like the epilogue really would have, having at least a very small epilogue or something. I don't know, it doesn't really help the story, but at the same time, for me, the last bit showed that they were meant to be together, and that even though they've gone through all these tragedies, which I don't like, I feel like Jane Eyre, they went through way more, and I was way more emotionally invested in their relationship. With this, I feel like I wasn't as invested in their relationship, and I enjoyed reading the epilogue and having it blatantly show that they miss Manderley terribly because they both loved the place there, especially Maxim. But they have some semblance of happiness together because they are with each other, and I liked that. The last 3 chapters are really what made me love this book. That was Rebecca. If you have read it, please let me know what you thought of it. I will be uploading new content every Friday. I'm going to try and do 2 videos a week, which I don't know how long I'll be able to keep that up. Also, I'm going to talk at least once a month about a TV show because I love TV shows and I watch them so much. So not every single week will be about books. Sometimes I'll switch it up a bit. I'm going to try and save reviews for Wednesdays, but I'm not sure if I'll actually be able to get them out at that time. So yeah, I hope you liked this video. Please let me know down in the comments what you thought of Rebecca. So yeah, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.